hate to say it, we might have to be forced to take part in society. You might have to hang onto your phone to scan your whereabouts into the government, and that's kind of what I'm seeing happening at the moment. Scares the pants off me. Obviously, doesn't scare the pants off enough people to stop it at the moment. There's been a lot of money invested in some sort of global tracking system for everyone. It is what it is.
Well, it's more likely to scare someone who was born before it happened, if you know what I'm saying. Like the younger generation, that if it's all they've ever known, then it's not going to scare them that much.
Yeah, it doesn't scare them so much. And well, I think we've lost a bit of look, the younger generation are amazing. They surprise me now at no end. A lot of the descriptions that get put onto them, I think are a bit harsh, ill-informed. You know, like they're not hardworking, or they just can't handle defeat. They need constant reassurance, all those sort of things. I think they're a bit overdone. What I think is their brain works at a different flow rate, is what I believe. Like they can make decisions and work. They can do multitask, right? Tell them to sit down and read a book for 10 hours and then come back and do a compression of that. Probably not so much. But their brain can like boom, boom, boom. They can make decisions. I can take this bit of information, take that bit of information, and it's amazing. But what there hasn't been enough time on, and what no one has thought is important, especially governments, is any sort of philosophical, ethics-based, humanism style studies about what it means to be a human being, what it means to be in a society, what sort of society do you want to have together? How do we all vibrate together in some sort of harmonious sort of fashion? If I was heading down towards the Buddhist style stuff, and being in Asia, mate, you understand that. Where I see a lot of things taken for granted, where, like, you're right, older people go, hey, hang on, I'm not sure I want the government tracking me, and the younger guys going, whatever, I'm used to being tracked. I don't care. In fact, I almost welcome being tracked, because it gives me some sort of convenience, and I can see my tracking, or I can upload my tracking, this and that. And so I guess there's also some history lessons that, you know, this generation has been fortunate enough not to have thrust upon them, which was sometimes government has overreach. Sometimes the people in government use all this information and knowledge to better themselves instead of bettering society. And so that's what I'm seeing is, if there's one problem coming, it is that there's some of the younger guys who are super smart. They're not students of history, where they just think, you know what, the government would never load everyone into a cattle car and gas them up, or all that sort of stuff like this. Only 90 years ago, there's been more of all the world. There's been lots of world wars, and there's wars ever since the day dot and Jesus was born, all those sort of things, right? But I think I listened to a human rights professor from Western Australia the other day, and he said on governments have had the most ability to kill their own people, more than all the wars. He said, you add up all the governments that have killed their own human beings, it's about 200 million in the last couple of hundred years. So you look at Germany, then you go to, Cambodia and Pol Pot, you get all these things over hundreds of years, and say, there's some of the things that the younger generations have never been taught. We barely got taught them. You have to go searching for this information. You've got to get to an age where you're a bit like, you know what, I'm just curious about how this shit works, sort of thing. Young generations, mate, they're just getting fed instant information so much, you can't pull back and go, who am I? What is the world? What are you guys? All that sort of stuff, So,
but I think you hit on something. I think you hit on something that was really, really spot on, and it was, and it's sad to say it, but I almost think that for a lot of the younger people that, like our generation, right? At least we knew somebody that fought in World War II, either a grandfather or in some cases an uncle or something like that. And now there's a break where the younger people don't have a close relative that they know who was involved in all the heartbreak and all that. And it's almost feels sometimes like all this giving up of personal privacy and allowing the government to track you and everything, it's not going to come home and register with a lot of these people until the day that something horrible happens because of it, like a genocide somewhere in the world where millions of people die because everybody's being tracked and they can hunt you down and kill you. Like, imagine, like, for example, imagine if some country went hardcore Stalinist or Nazi today with the technology there is to track people, GPS, satellites, everything.
Well, you could almost say China is having a good go at that.
But luckily they're not quite as evil as, say, this, Stalinist Soviet Union, where there were 20 million died from starvation and, that kind of stuff. Or even early China, like, in the Mao days, right? Like, at least, but at least now, knock on wood, at the moment, there's not anybody out there that's really using this technology to the evil lengths that it could be used. And I don't think people are going to really latch on to how bad this could be until something bad happens, unfortunately.
Yeah, look, you're right. The horse will have bolted, and everyone's like, "What? Really? I can't scan my wrist and go outside my district in my driverless vehicle because I haven't had my shot of whatever's in the shot lately. I've got to walk." These are like, it's almost like every kind of weird sci-fi kind of crazy movie that we've seen. There's snippets of all these movies coming up that realistically we're at this junction point in the world where, like, we could go down any one of these paths. The technology exists, the greed and the collaboration exists. It just depends on it depends on whether that is the collective goal of whoever rules the world, because it ain't us, Terry, and it ain't the politicians. And I guess then the collective pushback, for want of a better word. There's things getting thrown around at the moment called the Great Awakening, the Great Ascension. I don't know about these things. I think the world needs a Great Awakening anyway, whether there's a big push against it or not. There's a lot of things we could do way better. Countries aren't poor. They're just about every country. And you've worked in Africa, mate. Africa has got some of the richest resource countries. Those countries are super rich, but they're super poor because they're mismanaged by corporate corruption and greed in the government, right? So those countries the human beings are kept poor, but the countries are overly wealthy, right? Things like that shouldn't really happening. Maybe it's time that we can all, maybe there is an awakening that needs to happen in some sense. We might have to go through a bit of pain. I'm not looking forward to it at all. But it's not really something that I can control. I mean, look, you're right, mate. If you had Sweden, those guys are crazy, right? The Swedes. I love the Swedes. Look, they did some great stuff in the last 20 months. They didn't lock down. They had this. They kind of stood up for human rights, and I was like applauding them, going, "You guys!" And you know what? The results were good from them. They had a really low rates of death. It was some pretty decent stuff. And then they turn around and go, "Oh yeah, we're trialing having a little chip right there, and there's a company in Sweden that's doing it, and they've offered it to all their employees, and it gets them like candy bars from the machine, or they wave their hand in front of the door to get to a certain floor." And all these government, those employees, that company, like, "Oh, it's so amazing, it's so convenient." And then that company is saying, "Well, what we're going to do is it gives, it's for radio frequencies to pick up data, basically. It's like a memory stick, realistically. Mixed with a fob chain, or you'll be able to have your COVID vaccine update status on there. So, you'll be able to go through things, and you won't have to show the inconvenience of showing this green tick on your phone for your vaccine." And I'm just like, look at these guys, and these young Swedes going, "Oh, it's just so amazing. It's the technology." Oh, and they're going, "Oh, look, it's only if you want to. Our government would never force anyone to do it." I'm like, really, guys, really?
Yet.
I'm like, how could? Yeah, yet it's everything starts out as voluntary, right? Yeah. And then it's like, and I'm looking, it's like, I'm like, "Stop it, everyone, stop it!" But no, I'm just like, "Oh, look at us!" And there's one young guy is being interviewed about, and he works for the company, and he sort of had this swagger about himself, like he was so sexy, like he was almost this new, breed of human that was so up there, and like, he goes, "Oh, check it out! I can just do this, and out comes my can of Pepsi," sort of thing. He's like. And I'm like, "Oh man, you really? Is this how we're gonna like sort of sell the idea of being tracked like a cat, like in our country you can get kitchen cats, right? And this is what it's gonna be. It's like, oh, it's so sexy, so convenient. 50%. You know what? So many percentage of women think men in masks are attractive. You know, what the fuck is that? Realistically, it's only ugly guys that look good in masks because you can't see half their face.
But you know what? It's funny you said that though, because I watched a sci-fi movie before, and the name escapes me, unfortunately. But the plot was very, very similar, and it was talking about a world in the future where certain people have technological advancements and upgrades to their bodies. And so it becomes almost like a new species where like the poor countries of the world don't have it. And then the rich countries have like memory upgrades. They've got a shot that'll make you a little bit smarter. You're taking pills that make your memory better. And it's not that far fetched that there would be a two-class society where, you know, there are certain countries have chips in them that make them, you know, whatever make them less fat or something like that, like little thing, right?
Mate, they, look, and maybe that movie was sponsored by the WEF or maybe Elon Musk. You know, because those guys are already dabbling in that stuff, and you know, you can. There are countless articles and you know, interviews with big CEOs of, like, you know, the vice president of Google. Oh, by 2029, we want to be able to upload consciousness. It's like in 8 years' time. In 8 years' time, we want to be able to upload your consciousness and a whole lot of consciousness. And then I'm like, all right, so who controls that? Oh, Google do. Oh, so Google want to be God, right? That's what it is. They want to be God because they want to upload your consciousness. And then because if you can sustain the afterlife, then you are God, kind of thing, right? So there's all these crazy things.
It's basically Westworld. It's the plot of Westworld.
It's fucking, it is scary as shit. It's scary as shit. Yeah. And I always wonder whether Hollywood's kind of like preparing us for a few things. Like I'm wondering now whether I'm starting to see some articles about, there's a strange sound coming from out where, you know, maybe there's some aliens there, or like, should we all be, you know, like, you know, once you start seeing like, oh my God, if aliens did come, would they be friend or foe? Like, oh, we got to start thinking about aliens again. Then if you have like an alien invasion, we're all not like going, don't believe it, not too far fetched. Like, oh yeah, that's quite plausible. Yeah, I suppose we all should stay in our houses and give away all our money and our freedoms. And yeah, it's probably, yeah, the aliens might come out and, you know, that sort of thing. Like, it's just, I
think just everybody, I think it's just there's enough smart people in Hollywood that kind of see which way the wind's blowing, and they just extrapolate and go, you know what, based on what I see today, this is probably where we're going in 5 years, and they're fairly accurate.